So when you can't understand something, you surrender to something bigger than you, the divine energies that gave this life to us. Now, for those that aren't even a bit like squeamish toward the divine, even if you just the energy, like what happened before matter coalesced out of the Big Bang, everything was energy according to the physicists anyway. All right, so it was undifferentiated. It was like pre-cosmogonic goop. It was a big pile of energy that rapidly expands and then condensed into matter eventually, which is what we're dealing with now. So energy is at the root of it all, or very close to the root of it all. If we surrender, we're bringing our energy up to the crown. And if we surrender to the energy, we're essentially worshipping the goddess, or we're bowing down to the feminine principle. And that creates space for insight. Why? Because when we surrender the mind, we diminish the ego. How else does he suggest that we diminish the ego? Hi, I'm David Wegman. I'm the founder of Kailash Ashram. We are a traditional meditation and yoga retreat center in the Aussie outback. I'm a sniper turned meditator and yogin, and on this channel we love to share uplifting, soulful messages to help you reconnect to what's important, your soul. Tonight's sharing is based on our reading of Samarpan of the Himalayas, an autobiography of my guru, Swami Shivkrupanand. This is a real spiritual classic, very accessible. We've got links in the description if you want to follow along with us. Otherwise, just feel free to enjoy the spiritual messages as shared by me based on Swamiji's teachings. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Para Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So it's an interesting choice. Actually, before we get into the good stuff, let me show some housekeeping. Look at that. Embroidered hoodies are in stock. So we have finally succumbed to the merch train, and we have got some hoodies available on the web store. So it's through a drop shipping mob. So you just order it and they do it. We don't have any stock at the ashram. But yeah, if anyone likes to represent, we have a few things that are popping up and a few more ideas that are in the works. We've got a retreat starting in 2 weeks. It is chock-a-block. I think we're pretty much full. We've had a few drop out here and there, which is very normal. So that's the soul retreat. Again, back for a soul retreat in August. So if there are friends, family, you want to come back, you want to volunteer, that'll be the next opportunity. And then we look forward to, in the back half of the year, doing some of the offerings, the elements of yoga and the 4 yogas. And certainly if it's been a while since you've been out here, or if you've volunteered and you want to kind of get back into student mode, coming out of one of those retreats is going to be great. In terms of ashram stuff, we've got our Kailash Foundation, which is the registered charity, and we're doing a lot of work at the moment in developing veterans programs and getting our new facility that is going to be the home for that all set. So we will, this is my reminder to Raya, please let's put a calendar up on one of the weekends for Working Bee Weekend. We desperately need some help out here tending to the ever-growing property. Okay, I'm off the phone tonight, which is not I normally like my handwritten notes, but phone it is for me today, so excuse me whilst I navigate this. So Swamiji, we continue with his Sri Brahmanand Swami journey and the dialogue going backwards and forwards. It feels like 10 pages condenses quite a lot of knowledge. The pipe and the water analogy, it's a Swamiji classic. He badges us with that one, quite a lot. The pipe connected to a reservoir, a tank. The pipe or the tap is used as a conduit through which the water flows. It's really kind of great analogy that speaks to what Swamiji talks about as the Chaitanya, or the consciousness that flows through the Guru. So consciousness flows through mediums for consciousness, but the medium is not itself consciousness, the way that the pipe is not itself the water. It is a conduit through which we get water. Now, if we find ourselves thirsty, we need to take ourselves to the place at which the water is dispensed. In nature, river, sky, you could open your mouth and point it up to the heavens when it's raining, but typically river, dam. In modernity, we look at aqueducts, water sources, taps. Marvel of modern plumbing that we've got fresh water in all of our houses. It's the city wouldn't exist without it. So why does he stress this example? And what can this tell us about our own self? And how can this instruct us to view the relationship, not just with the guru, but what the guru symbolizes, which is our soul. So the conduit, each conduit has its own benefits. Plastic is cheap. Copper is malleable. Lead has its, was easy to work, but poisoned people. Plastic can turn brittle in the sun and eventually crack. So all of these different materials offer us something, but they come with their own limitations. Now, as somebody who is thirsty, are we going to get fussy about the sort of pipe that, is before us? Anyone who's been in a survival situation will tell you that, a couple of days into thirst, we can only go a couple of days without consuming water. A couple of days in, you will be sucking puddle water straight, So what Swamiji here is sharing is to not fixate upon the fault of the medium, but to focus upon what is flowing through them. And that does something to our own mind when we are paying attention to the knowledge that comes from a guru or through the experiences that we're having around the guru. Now, left brain, right brain. Right brain, expanding, broadening aspect. That's what that capacity of that organ helps us with. It helps us to zoom out and see the bigger picture. The left brain helps us to focus and to break things apart. So let's think what are we doing when we're breaking something apart, or when we're criticizing something, we're breaking it apart. Now, that can be done for good effect when we're trying to understand something. You can take something apart and that can instruct you on the way the thing comes together. But what Swamiji here is sharing, or what I see from the neurological perspective, is that if we get into the left brain, that is our critical self, where we're analyzing the faults of the being before us. You could, if you were old school from a different generation, you might be looking at me going, oh, he hasn't had a shave in a while. He's not showing much respect to me, or you might have your own criticisms. Probably not if you're tuning in on a Zoom, but many people will have their criticisms of me. I'm too young to be sharing the things that I'm sharing, or don't have the correct skin pigmentation to be talking about yoga. Some people will criticize me for. That's called putting our attention on the faults of the guide or the person who is sharing. If you put your attention on the knowledge, the eternal knowledge, the Sanatana Dharma that is flowing through, in this case, here I'm the one sharing, but in the circumstance, really it's Swamiji that's sharing, and I'm trying to relay as best I can the knowledge that I've gained from being a disciple of his. When we put our attention on seeing through the form, the structure, the pipe, we're activating the right part of our brain, and that really guides us to the soul. Remember, right brain connects to left side of the body. It's the feminine side, and as we will continue through this journey, we'll see that Swamiji really does emphasize the femininity piece. Okay, so faults of the pipe, left brain, not going to make us feel like a soul. Being consciously putting our attention into hearing something deeper in whatever that person who is before us is saying gives us a connection to our soul, leads us to greater insight, leads us to making better decisions. I pay attention to what my kids say, you know, and I listen to it not from like, you're my kid, you should be doing what I'm saying. Like, I listen, and I really have to make an effort to go to humble myself because, you know, of the parent-child dynamic, and just listen to what they're saying and listen through what they're saying. And so often they will share something that is, you know, very poignant or very astute, well beyond their years. You know, I might be going through a bit of an internal process, and my daughter will just come in and go, I think I need to give you a hug, Dad. And, you know, if I want, I could just explain that away, see the fault, and just go, it's just a coincidence. My young kid just wants to come and hug me. If I engage that right brain and zoom out and see the awareness, the relationship between the internal state that I was having and then what my daughter came and did, what I can then feel is not just her love, but the love of God flowing through to support me in the time of need. And then that, you know, bolsters my faith and my conviction. So we look beyond the form. What is the thing beyond the form? It is the formless. It is Shiva. It is the soul. And this is a practice. This meditation leads to a wakeful awareness beyond form. And when we start anchoring ourselves in that place, well, I say that is you know, a prerequisite to inner peace. If you are anchored in the material game, which is characterized by change and impermanence, ain't much peace going to happen as a consequence of that. Interestingly, Swamiji talks about what it takes to come into the contact of a pipe of someone who is sharing inner knowledge. And it is precisely the karma that we have, the action that we have done in past life. It is not because you are special and virtuous in this life, though, yes, you are all special and virtuous and whatnot, but the work that we did in previous lives have set up a series of relationships, and then in this life we find those sources of knowledge who are here to guide us. So this is why we don't push very hard. I mean, we spend a bit on Facebook ads, so we push hard on that, but we don't force anybody to come to the ashram. We're not on the street corners. We're not proselytizing, because people who have a destiny to hear something from myself or Raya, or those who've got the destiny that to hear something from Swamiji, it's not up to me, it's not up to Raya, it's not up to a Swamiji, it's not up to anybody. It is your relationship with those people who have the knowledge, and it's got to be arrived at on your own terms. If I start getting out there and go, hey, you want to come and meet my Swamiji friend, like it comes off, you know, one, it rubs people the wrong way in this kind of culture, but similarly, you know, you run the risk of making people neurotic in thinking that they need to have that connection. I know that I've needed to have that connection. Whether or not somebody else needs that can be answered from within. What's a good takeaway from knowing that that it's our past birth that set up this birth is the fact that, like, if this isn't going to be our last birth, which it could be if you want it to be, but if you still feel you need a few more births, do some good work in this life, because it will set up encounters with people who can liberate you in the next birth. Interestingly, just, you know, some of the kind of narrative devices that Swamiji uses, he goes from kind of talking about this stuff, and then he starts talking about Gurudev is an expert at lighting fires. And, you know, if you're just reading it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, this guru figure must know how to rub two stones together. You know, that's the first read. That's kind of what I thought. Oh, but he's just talking about the character trait of this guru figure. No, what he's talking about is the nature of Gurudev. Now, he uses the word Gurudev, which Dev is God and Guru is the Guru as God. So it's a real salutation. It's saying, I see God in you, Guru. And something Swamiji does throughout all of his books is he refers to all of his gurus as Gurudev, which is really nice in that it's a unifying force. So it's not like I'm going to this Swami for this problem and this Swami for this problem and this Swami for this problem. No, it is Gurudev that is speaking to me through these beings. Water is one, whether it comes through the plastic, copper, or lead pipe, it is water. And Swamiji uses that Gurudev to taste the water, to move beyond the differentiation that the mind, the left brain, gets stuck into. Interestingly, lighting the fire, what is it that is being lit inside of Swamiji? It's the inner fire. And certainly the meditation can build our own inner fire, our own inner conviction. And in that light, well, what does the light do? The fire generates light, the light illumines the darkness. And that means that we can then go through the sorting operation and clearing up all of those samskaras or the negative tendencies that might be with us that need to be released. He speaks at length about sexual desire, which was the second, or I think it was like the third time I read this, maybe third time I read this book. I was like, I don't remember reading this in the first one. Like, this is pretty direct, and he kind of lays it out and tells it how it is. And I think it's I'd been meditating for 6 or 7 years by the third read through of his books. And when I read it, it helped me reframe a dimension of life, which and sort of he set a direction or an energy that is really common sense and applicable for a householder. Ram Dass used to talk about it in the sense that these people, especially Westerners, get caught up in the Indic spiritual traditions, and they start renouncing all of this stuff because that's what a priestly person does in India. They're not engaged in the sexual world, or a monk is not. They're brahmacharya, they're renunciate. They don't engage in the sexual life. And so young wannabe spiritual types go and then start doing these sorts of things, and Ram Dass called them the horny celibates. So all you do when you force or you impose a restriction on a natural function is the suppression costs you a lot of energy, and then it comes through in unhealthy ways, often disturbances of the mind, especially second chakra, water element. If there's imbalances here through an imposition of like, nope, then the mind will go a little bit bonkers. So, what is the advice? Allow nature to be nature, and allow when one's self, one's whole being is oriented towards the correct hierarchy and the correct structuring of life, which, in the hierarchy and the structure of the yoga, we would say the soul is the most important thing, and then all of these lower functions flow from it. So when we build our life oriented towards the spirit or to the soul or to, upholding those universal human values, nature kind of finds its balance. It finds a middle path where things aren't done in excess. And that's a great indication. If we see and sit and give ourselves time for stillness to reflect upon our life and what we're doing, we know the answers to our own problems. We know those areas of our life that are out of balance. Oftentimes it is the lack of inner drive or belief in ourselves that stops us from, rectifying those patterns. I was having a conversation with Raya earlier also about just the nature of the different experiences we go through, some of them traumatic. They set up energetic dispositions inside of us that mean that we can be operating in loops, in patterns of reinforcement of behaviors that we might not link to those initial traumas. And for those that are interested in understanding more in that space, I highly recommend the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, who's big expert in PTSD and the relationship between body and mind, and how psychiatry gets a lot of it wrong. Unfortunately, drugs is seldom the answer, though for some it can be life-saving. Interestingly, Bessel is a big advocate for yoga and has seen it do wonders for people recovering from trauma. So is it any wonder that it's helped myself and Raya and many of you whom I know are dealing with the aftermath of that sort of stuff too. So utilizing the body in a deliberate manner to move beyond the body and to find balance in the peace of mind and also the deeper quiet of the soul is it's a well-trodden path. A similar vein to this kind of notion of forced control being not great, being destructive for us, Swamiji also talks about fasting as one of those things that people can use to self-flagellate. So fasting can be, in some spiritual traditions, it does actually change the brain. Like what happens, it makes you go into ketosis and the brain can burn really clear when it's running on its own high octane generated fuels from the liver. I love being in ketosis. I actually follow a ketogenic diet, so it mimics fasting, but fasting as a spiritual imposition, it can elicit some nice states of mind, a bit more of a contemplative mind. But it should come, what Swamiji says, naturally. It should be a result of absorption in meditation, not I'm going to fast for like 3 days so I can elicit or shortcut my way to a spiritual state. It should flow from your natural meditative state. Now, I'm not suggesting we need to be sitting there for 3 days in meditation, but certainly I've been engaged in tasks if I'm doing some woodworking in the shed, especially being ketogenic, but even when I wasn't, working away and lose the awareness, of time. So there's a researcher back in the 80s and 90s, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he's the guy that really kind of coined the term the flow state. And if you've been in one of those flow states, you certainly know what it is. It's a beautiful experience, and in many regards, the yogic dance, the nritta, the hatha yoga is designed to pull you into that trance. But for a lot of people, it can be crochet or bike riding or doing something, and when you're in that absorption, the questions about who you are, what you're doing here, where you need to go, they all just dissolve. You're purely with the thing that you are doing. One of the biggest downfalls of modern time is, this old thing where you can just chuck on a podcast or listen to something whilst you're doing something else. Even listening to music pulls your attention away from what you're actually doing. And, a lot of the time I like to listen to things, and there's no shortage of interesting things out there in the world. But what comes when we are in that flow state is a sense of peace fundamentally, and also I find it to be rejuvenating and reinvigorating of the spirit. So Swamiji is also told here a similar story that many of his gurus told him, that his receiving capacity is very large because he's got a big job to distribute to a lot of people. And this kind of came as quite a shock. I think Swamiji was putting himself back in his kind of mid-20s mind, or however old he was when he was there first in the Himalaya, and he couldn't understand or see what his gurus saw. And he did, though, remark that his inner journey had commenced. That's one thing that had kind of dawned on him at that time. So prior to that, he had a wish to meet Paramatma, to see the external universal consciousness, to the external God. And I think what the guru was doing here was just gently turning that avenue of inquiry back in on himself, which is really the yogic, the Vedantic path. It isn't that we try to find some external artifact in the world that is going to take us to God. We are going to equip ourselves with technologies and practices that help us guide our attention back to the divinity that is already dwelling within us. That's the punchline. Obviously, we don't need to go looking because we are it already. the mind is a tricky beast, and it certainly loves to protest and search externally for, everything, for the desires of the body, for the titillation of the mind itself. There was a really nice sort of, again, when we look at Swamiji's talking about his process as a little bit of an instruction of how we can deal with our own being, there's just so much gold in it. He says that when you can't understand, you surrender to the Guru energies. So if you can't understand something, surrender to the Guru energies. Okay, so firstly, what are the Guru energies? What are the Guru Shaktis? So Shakti is the feminine or the energy principle. The Guru, one way of understanding Guru is Gu is the darkness and Ru is the destroyer. So it's the remover of the remover of darkness, the energy that removes the darkness. Interestingly, Swamiji calls the meditation halls the Guru Shakti Dham. So the Dham is the place. So the place of the descent of the energy that removes darkness fundamentally. So when you can't understand something, surrender to the Guru Shakti. Now the Guru Shakti is the energy of the Guru element, Guru Tattva. So that energy flows. The nature of energy is that it wants to move, that it wants to flow. And life is that phenomenon that grows, flows, evolves, moves. If we're not growing, we're dead, we're decaying. But even decay is a process of movement and growth into another dimension. So when Swamiji says you're blocked where? When you don't understand, you are blocked at the third eye, okay? Because understanding is a faculty, knowledge and mind. Ignorance is the problem, knowledge, understanding, that's what we want. When you understand something, okay, feel at ease. If you don't understand something, what does he say? Surrender to the Guru energies. So he's pushing you to just go beyond your mental understanding. Now, what I thought was really, really great about this, a bit like when you're in the flow state, many scientists, artists, writers, mathematicians will report that the more they think about their problem, they're dealing with their problem, and they're working on their latest PhD or whatever the paper is, and they're stuck at some kind of impasse. And then they go and have a shower, and then bing, it hits them. Or they wake up at 2 a.m. and a flash of insight. Or they're, washing the dishes, and suddenly the crystallization occurs. The insight just kind of goes off. So when you can't understand something, you surrender to something bigger than you, the divine energies that gave this life to us. Now, for those that don't even a bit like squeamish toward the divine, even if you just like what happened before matter coalesced out of the Big Bang, everything was energy according to the physicists anyway. All right, so it was undifferentiated. It was like pre-cosmogonic goop. It was a big pile of energy that rapidly expands and then condensed into matter eventually, which is what we're dealing with now. So energy is at the root of it all, or very close to the root of it all. If we surrender, we're bringing our energy up to the crown. And if we surrender to the energy, we're essentially worshipping the goddess, or we're bowing down to the feminine principle. And that creates space for insight. Why? Because when we surrender the mind, we diminish the ego. How else does he suggest that we diminish the ego? By praying about our problems. So you pray, look, I'm stuck. And a great way to pray that I think I learned this one from Jordan Peterson or someone over the years. I didn't invent it, so I'm not going to claim credit for it. But you start a prayer with admitting your insufficiencies. You're like, I don't understand this. That's a great thing. You're diminishing the ego. I'm full of ignorance. I have no idea how to move past this situation. Please, energy of this universe, God, whatever you believe in, can you help me with this problem? And then you stop and you allow it to be. And then the insight, the problem will be solved. Oftentimes, commensurate with the level of faith that you had. Had you enough faith, you could move mountains. If you're new to the praying game and asking for help for your problems, you might want to just pray about a few small things before you challenge yourself. The issue that we face if we chew off a big prayer, but we don't have much faith, and then the issue doesn't get solved, then we get left being more cynical towards the spirit. Now, I've got this knowledge. I've been working this stuff for a number of years, and I want to understand the problem with, like, why is my knee sore? And the solution or the answer took sometimes 5 years to manifest. So I've been praying for this thing to go away, and the energetic linkages connected with some of the injuries are showing tendencies or imbalances in my own mind and body that need to be addressed. They got put there by me over decades. They will need to be dealt with for as long as they need to be dealt with. If you have a naive or a juvenile way of praying, it's like, I want my problem solved instantaneously. Look, sometimes that happens, and sometimes the grace moves in swift, mysterious ways that just chop us away from things that we don't need. But a lot of the time, what I feel our own souls are yearning for is not for our problems to go away, but for us ourselves to become strong enough to face those problems. Why? Because if we get strong and the external problem, if we just get all of our external problems that go away, say we could solve all of the issues that face humanity on planet Earth, what would we do? We'd sit around, fundamentally undifferentiated from saints, because there's no problems and all the problems are solved. There's no requirement for there to be a creation. There's no reality itself. So instead of praying for those problems to go away, I pray that I could be strong to be able to face them. And that means that once I'm done dealing with the thing that is currently challenging me, I will be able to change my target and move on to the next problem. And as we shared last week, Swamiji laid it out. Life is problem and solution, and problem and solution, and problem and solution. And if you think that he is exempt from this, you don't know nothing. Raya and I, obviously quite a lot of friends in Swamiji's community, and we hear about the intimate details of all of the crazy stuff that goes on. They hosted him for his 70th birthday in Singapore last year or the year before, and my Lord, the amount of stuff that stirred up, and the infighting and the bickering and all of the drama that goes on as a consequence of life. He isn't spared. We're not going to be spared. So, we cultivate those values through things like showing ourselves we can sit still for 30 minutes. He talks about, in order to absorb and distribute, one must have a large heart. The heart of a mother, indeed. So for those of you that are interested in sharing meditation with other people, or sharing anything with any people, or guiding other people, or teaching, or whatever it is, it's that feminine side that has to come alive in order to really get that point across. Why? Because the mother gives selflessly. And, Raya and I have noticed the difference between running a charity versus when our ashram had a commercial basis, which was never really the intention. We didn't run this as a business. We were doing what we were doing, and we had to pay the bills. But now running it as a charity, there's a completely different vibe. And I'm not going to lie, it brings its own challenges, not having the same sort of systems and gung-ho-ness that was there when we were running more commercially. It's shown okay, well, I have to volunteer, and maybe my capacity to work is different than my capacity to volunteer. And it brings out a different, vibration inside of me. And that certainly is something that I would encourage all of us, through the practice of karma yoga, to distribute, to give something. You don't need to be some giant soul like Swamiji who's here to enlighten the masses or whatever it's his karma to do. You do you, but bring in that dimension of karma yoga, of serving others, and see what it brings you. And in fact, that is the nature of nature. Nature is what gives. And there was a really beautiful sort of poetic description that Swamiji gave, that, you know, the drop of rain gives itself into the stream gives itself into a large river, the river gives itself into the ocean. Like, this is the nature of nature. And when we ourselves see that our human activity can be an extension of that, rather than trying to hoard, which is the material Nabi chakra kind of, ego-centered way of living in the West, trying to hoard as much power and control to protect your own little fiefdom, that is a recipe for suffering. Distributing and going, wow, I learned this cool thing, I wonder who I can share that with, because it just lifts me up to share it. That's the antidote. And so I pray that you're able to share a little bit of you, even if it's just a happier version of you from doing a little bit of meditation. And as I listen right now, I'm kind of happy because I've been talking long enough for the neighbor to stop playing his music, which means it's time to meditate. But I deeply appreciate all of your attention. Kirsten, Nicole, Jane, Georgie, Olivia, Kate, Raya, Jaya, Ruth, and Lucille. Brilliant to have you. I'll leave a voice note in here for those who are tuning in on the replay. Please, if you can, make it on the Tuesday and come and sit and be a part of it if you want. That's certainly a nicer way to do it. And there's something else that comes through when we're sitting here kind of almost in the same room, certainly in the same Zoom room. So I'll say Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. JF Meshwar, we'll see you next week. I'll get you facing the altar and we'll all have a sit. If this sharing has been useful for you, please consider hitting that like button and a subscribe if you want to hear more from us. Also, I would love for you to join me on a retreat at any stage. There's links in our description to get you started with meditation, as well as joining me on a retreat in the Grampians. Jayat Meshwar means victory to your soul as the divine. See ya.